the time that we're starting the second half of our fabulous annual Tellabration. And the first half was delightful and deep and delicious and the stuff of dreams. It was quite a program. And we're continuing on with the program. And I'm going to call in our first teller, who is Antley Ann, and I'll be introducing her. Antley Ann is a Renaissance woman. She does all the things that I admire, from herbal healer to singer to actor, brilliant storyteller. And now she's teaching a storytelling class through Mira Costa. And you can stay on later tonight in the program after we're done, and we'll bring the tellers back and you can chit chat. And I've seen some impressive folks who have taken that storytelling class. And without further ado, this is Antley Ann with an Ecuadorian folk tale, and she'll tell you about it.
Oh, thank you so much, Mindy. Yeah, this story is from Ecuador, as Mindy mentioned, and I found it in a very obscure place, and then in the course of researching, realized it's also in Heather Forrest's most popular folktales from around the world, and there's a version in lots of other places as well, because stories, they travel on two legs and they go everywhere around the world. And I hope that after you hear this, maybe you'll tell it to someone else. Long ago, when the Inca ruled all the known world, there was a little girl named Samakai who lived with her parents, who were elderly, and her two older siblings, Meli and Melo. And they lived on a farm that had once been prosperous, but through no fault of theirs had fallen on very hard times. Earthquakes and storms, illness had racked the animals until they had just one little cornfield left that was struggling, and one little llama that had been an orphan and Samakai had raised from a baby as a pet. Now, her older siblings, Meli and Melo, were getting very worried about what would happen to their parents in their old age without a farm to sustain the family. And just then, they got news in their village from the king that anyone who found the water and brought it to the palace from the magic lake at the end of the world where the sky met the water, if they would bring that to the prince, they would be richly rewarded. This prince was the only child of the king, and he had been sickly since the day he was born, but now in his 12th year, he had become rapidly more and more ill until the king didn't know what to do. He spent an entire day and night locked in his room, burning herbs he had gotten from the wise woman on his altar, crying out at night to the full moon above, Mama Kia, all the gods, what can I do to save my son? And at the end of the night, as the sun was just peeking over the horizon, he looked in the ashes on his altar, and there was a golden vessel. And as he picked it up, he heard a sweet, small voice say, if you can get your son water from the magic lake at the end of the world and put it to his lips, he will survive. But if you do not, he will die before I hide my face again at the new moon. Well, the king wasted no time. He threw open his doors. He sent messengers to all corners of his empire, saying, please, anyone who can find the magic lake at the end of the world, bring water to my son, and you will be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams. And when that message came to Samakai's village, Meli and Malo went to their parents. Mama, Papa, we are going to save our family. We will find the magic lake at the end of the world, and we will save the prince. And off they went, up into the mountains, into the deep, dark forest. And they searched, following creeks and rivers to lake after lake. They could not find the magic lake at the end of the world. And one day Mélie said, how would they know if the water came from the magic lake? And Milo said, I will just fill our flask here at this lake. And then they went to the royal city and presented themselves at the gate. And a wise woman met them and took their flask of lake water and poured it into that golden vessel and looked inside and threw the water in their faces and sent them away to prison in chains. When that news reached Samakai's village, she was distraught. Mama, Papa, I know the gods will help me find the magic lake at the end of the world. Please let me go and search, and maybe I can help Mélie and Milo regain their freedom. After much, much protesting, they finally relented, and Mama packed a sack with parched corn, and Papa gave her a bottle of chicha, the corn beverage, and she took her flute that her mama had taught her how to play, the ocarina, and a flask, and she kissed her pet llama goodbye. And she went up, up into the mountain and into the dark woods. And she worried, like that little cherry-picking woman, if she would be in danger in the dark woods. But then she saw the birds, the piscos. We might say los perejitos, or in English, the little birds. But she was Quechua, she called them piscos. She saw them circling up above, and she thought, I will play them the lullaby my mama taught me. And the birds came down and sat at her feet, and she opened her bag of corn and fed them almost all of it before she ate herself. And then she watched the birds roost in the branch of the tree. She thought, that is where I will be safe tonight. She climbed up and she went to sleep in the branches. And just before dawn, when she woke up, she could hear the birds, the piscos, talking to each other in human language. And one was saying, oh, that little girl, she will never find the magic lake at the end of the world without our help. And the falcon said, oh, well, she was very kind. She helped us by giving us corn, and she played that beautiful music. And yes, we should help her. And all the piscos agreed. And Samakai sat up and said, How can you help me? And they said, at great cost to ourselves, we will give you each a wing feather. She took the feathers, and she took a ribbon from her hair and bound the feathers together, the tall one from the scarlet macaw, the little one from the sparrow, and all those in between. And they said, this will take you wherever you need to go. And she lifted the fan, and a huge wind whoosh, blew up and lifted her high into the sky until she was way above the mountains. And she flew faster and faster along the Andes, the spine of the world, until at last she could see the lake, the magic lake where the water met the sky. And she was set down on its sandy shore. Oh, thank you. She took her flask and dipped it into the lake, and the water turned dark, and a huge red claw came out of the water, followed by an enormous red crab who was snapping right in Samakai's face, and it was saying, "How dare you, little girl?" And she didn't even think. She lifted the fan, she put it in front of her face, and she began to sing the lullaby. There is no fear here, just the piscos and me. There is no fear here, trust Mama Kia and see. When she brought the fan down, the crab was floating on top of the lake, sleeping and snapping its claws gently while it slept. She took the flask and tried to fill it again when from behind her came a huge roar. There was a puma, twice the size of an ordinary puma, coming right at her with paws that were the size of Samakai's head and claws that were so sharp right at her face. And she put the fan up and sang, there is no fear here, just the piscos and me. There is no fear here, trust Mama Kia and see. Oh, the puma had curled up on the sand like a little kitten and was purring and snoring in the sand. Well, now she looked around to her left, to her right, ahead and behind, and seeing no more guardians, she took the flask one more time. When above her head she felt hot air being blown down towards her, and she looked up, and there was a huge black serpent undulating in the sky with enormous iridescent wings, and it hissed, how dare you try to take our sacred water? I will burn you where you stand. There is no fear here, just the piscos and me. There is no fear here, trust Mama Kia and see. Then she saw the serpent fall in slumber from the sky, splashing into the lake, and the water rose up and filled her flask. She wasted no time lifting the fan high in the air, and the wind blew up even stronger and faster than before, and she flew all the way to the royal palace and was dropped directly in the chambers of the prince. She saw the golden vessel next to him, beside the bed where his parents were weeping over the very nearly dead boy. She picked up the vessel and poured the water in. She took it and put it right up to his lips. And he sat straight up and looked at Samakai and said, you have saved me, as the color came back to his cheeks. And pandemonium shook the room. The king stood up and clapped his hands. He said, you have saved my boy. Tell me, what is your name? Samakai. Ah, your parents named you Adventurer. Well, what would you have? Perhaps you would like to be part of the royal family? Oh, said Samakai, I would just like Mali and Malo to be set free. They meant no harm. They had good intentions for our parents. Done, said the king, and sent his people to release them. But surely you would like something for yourself. Oh, if only these feathers could be returned to my friends, the Pishkos. And while the king and Samakai looked on, the feathers disappeared, poof, in magic smoke. Oh! The king laughed. It looks as though that has taken care of itself. What would you have, Samakai? I would have llamas and vicunas and alpacas and seed corn, enough so that my parents' farm would last prosperous for generations. It shall be done, said the king. And the prince said, but surely you will come back and visit me? And Samakai did. Many, many times throughout the years, the prince and Samakai grew up together, becoming fast friends. And when it was time for that prince to marry, it was obvious to all who saw them that there would be no other bride but Samakai. And so the king got his wish as well, and she became part of the royal family.
Leanne, that was so layered and so nuanced a story. What a privilege to hear it, really, and to experience it.
Thank
Wow. And I have never heard the phrase, of all the phrases there that were so powerful, the spine of the world. And I'll be thinking about that for a long time. Thank you so much.